Combat eyewear. 1 in 8 soldiers who lost an eye in Iraq and Afghanistan had been issued protection that could have saved it and refused to wear it. They went to war in sunglasses they bought themselves instead. The Army knew they would. Its own study said so in 1997. It issued the gear anyway for 2 more wars. The wound that took those eyes almost always came the same way. Not a bullet, a fragment, thrown by a blast the soldier never saw coming. Surgeons have a word for losing the eye to it: enucleation. And the protection that could have stopped many of those wounds went unworn, because the men who knew best what a fragment does to an eye trusted civilian Oakleys over their own Army's gear. The Army didn't ban the sunglasses, it just let the soldier pay for the fix himself. 3 pieces of standard issue eye protection, and the field failures that put every one of them on a soldier's forehead instead of his face. 3 civilian companies that fixed in a catalog what the Army couldn't fix in a decade, paid for by soldiers out of their own salaries. And the official Army eyewear list that ended with a pair of mall sunglasses stamped government issue because the Army had run out of every other way to lose. Among the combat wounds American forces took in Iraq and Afghanistan, somewhere between 6 and 15% landed on the eye. In 1997, years before the towers fell, the United States Army had asked its own soldiers a written question. Were they wearing the protection it issued them? They were not. An IED does not aim. When it detonates, it throws everything around it outward at once: dirt, gravel, window glass, shards of its own casing, a wall of debris moving faster than a man can blink. Most of that debris meets armor, or a helmet, or simply misses, but some of it travels at the height of a face, and the face has one part that nothing closes in time and nothing grows back. The eye is a soft target the size of a marble. It is roughly 0.1% of the surface area of the human body, a fraction so small it should almost never be hit. It was hit constantly. The roadside bomb was the reason. By the best available count, close to 7 in 10 of those eye injuries came from blast fragmentation. Not bullets, not knives, flying debris from an explosion the soldier never saw coming. And the cost of being hit there is unlike being hit almost anywhere else. In that same peer-reviewed study, 890 combat eye injuries, about 1 in 8, ended the same way. Not with stitches, not with a scar, with the eye removed from the socket. Surgeons call it enucleation. A soldier calls it the rest of his life. That same 1997 study, a behavioral analysis published in Military Medicine, recorded something else, in the soldier's own words. Why the eyewear stayed in the pack. It was too hot. It fogged the moment they moved. It scratched until they were looking through a smear. And it made them look, in their words, foolish. The Army held that finding for the better part of a decade. Then it sent a generation of soldiers into 2 wars with the same eyewear in their packs. To understand why a soldier would gamble his own eyesight rather than wear what the Army handed him, you have to put that eyewear in your own hands. Start with the goggles. The first answer was the sun, wind, and dust goggle, the Army's sealed desert goggle. The problem it was built to solve was real. A soldier in a desert faces glare that aches, wind that dries the eye, and fine sand that turns every gust into an abrasive. The goggle sealed the eye off from all of it. A foam-lined frame pressed flush against the face, a thick, impact-rated lens across the front. On paper, total coverage. In the field, that seal became the enemy. A sealed goggle traps whatever is inside it. In a vehicle in an Iraqi summer, what was inside it was heat and sweat. The lens fogged from the inside the moment a soldier exerted himself, and exertion is the entire job. He would step out of a truck, start moving toward a building, and watch the world turn to milk at the exact moment he needed to see it. So he did the only thing he could. He pushed the goggles up onto the front of his helmet, where they protected nothing, and he cleared a target with his eyes bare. On paper, a sealed goggle is the most protective design available. In the field, the most protected soldier is the one wearing a goggle on his forehead. The Army understood the goggle was too much, so it issued something slimmer, something it hoped a soldier might actually keep on his face: the Ballistic and Laser Protective Spectacle. This was the Army's spectacle answer. Not a sealed goggle, but a pair of glasses, a ballistic-rated lens, light enough to forget, with the added benefit of filtering certain laser wavelengths a soldier might face on a modern battlefield. The logic was sound. Give the man something close to ordinary eyewear, and he will wear it the way he wears ordinary eyewear, all the time. In the field, the soldiers looked at the ballistic spectacle and refused it on sight. The frame was thick, square, and institutional. The lens geometry was dated. Troops had a nickname for Army-issue glasses that had followed military eyewear for generations: birth control glasses. The ballistic spectacle earned every letter of it. This sounds shallow. It is not. Go back to that 1997 study. Appearance was not a side comment in the data. It was one of the named reasons soldiers gave for leaving protective eyewear in a pocket. A 22-year-old infantryman is not going to wear something that makes him look, to himself and to the men beside him, like a liability. Comfort can be ordered. Confidence cannot. On paper, the ballistic spectacle put a ballistic lens in front of the eye in the lightest package the Army had ever fielded. In the field, it was the pair of glasses the soldier was most embarrassed to be seen in. The Army had now learned something expensive. The problem was not only heat and not only fog. The problem was trust. So it tried a third time. The third answer was the Special Protective Eyewear Cylindrical system, spoken as one word: specs. And the specs were genuinely better. A cylindrical lens that wrapped the eye with less distortion. A cleaner, more modern frame. Real optical quality. If you line up the three issued systems side by side, the specs are the clear high point, the design the Army should have started with. But the specs arrived into a situation no improved lens could repair. By the time they reached soldiers, the Army had already spent years issuing eyewear those soldiers had learned to distrust. The sun, wind, and dust goggle had taught them issued eyewear fogs. The ballistic spectacle had taught them issued eyewear is embarrassing. A soldier does not run a fresh evaluation on every new item in the supply chain. He pattern matches. Army eyewear had a pattern, and one good product does not erase it. On paper, the specs were a real fix. In the field, they were the right answer delivered to an audience that had already stopped listening. Three issued systems: a sealed goggle, a ballistic spectacle, and a genuinely good spectacle that came too late to be believed. The Army had spent years trying to put something in front of the American eye, so the soldier solved it himself with his own credit card. A soldier deploying in 2003 did not file a requirement or wait on a procurement cycle. He walked into a store or opened a catalog, and he spent his own money on eyewear the Army had never handed him. He was not trying to make a statement. He was trying to see. 3 companies were waiting on that shelf. None of them had been built by the Pentagon. All 3 of them would end up doing the Army's job for it. The first was Oakley. Oakley was founded by a man named James Gennard, and it did not begin in defense. It began in sport. Oakley built its entire reputation on one obsession: lens clarity. Eyewear for cyclists, for skiers, for athletes who needed to see a fast-moving world with 0 distortion and 0 delay. Their combat-relevant product was the M-Frame. It retailed for about $150 at any Oakley dealer in the country. A soldier paid for it out of his own paycheck. A single curved shield of a lens mounted on a minimal frame, light enough that a soldier forgot it was there. Optically clean edge to edge, because clean edges were the only thing Oakley had ever cared about. And it shed heat instead of trapping it, because it was never sealed against the face the way a goggle was. There was one more thing the M-Frame did that no Army study would ever put in a column. It looked right. A soldier wanted to wear it. And the eyewear a soldier wants to wear is the eyewear that is actually on his face when the blast comes. On the question that decided everything, whether the protection is being worn, the Sport Sunglasses Company beat 3 military programs. But Oakley had backed into this war from the world of sport. The next company had walked into it on purpose. The second answer started with a soldier who had a different problem than fog. His Oakleys were clear, and they were comfortable. And on a patrol through a dust storm, none of that mattered, because fine grit was getting in around the edges and scratching the eye anyway. He needed a seal. He also needed to know, not hope, know, that the lens in front of his eye would actually stop a fragment, because the box it came in was a sport box, and sport is not the same as ballistic. The company that answered both of those was Wiley X. Wiley X was built by Miles Freeman Sr., an Army veteran, and it had never been a sport brand discovering the military. It was aimed at protection and duty use from the start, and it spoke the military's own language: impact standards, ballistic ratings, the exact vocabulary a procurement officer used. That focus showed in the product. Wiley X eyewear was built to meet hard ballistic impact standards, not just sport impact standards, and it offered a sealed gasket version. That gasket did what the Army's sealed goggle had tried and failed to do. It kept the grit out, without turning the lens into a fog trap, because the rest of the design was built around airflow instead of against it. Oakley had given the soldier clarity he wanted to wear. Wiley X gave him a ballistic rating he could point to, from a company that already thought like the Army it was selling to. 2 companies. One came from sport, one from service. The third answer started with the soldier the first 2 had left behind, the one who could not just buy a pair of sunglasses at all. A soldier who needs a prescription to see does not get to pick eyewear off a shelf. For him, a goggle was the only option, and the Army's sealed goggle fogged the same way it fogged for everyone else. He was choosing between seeing the threat and protecting the eye that saw it. He should never have had to choose. The company that answered that soldier was Eye Safety Systems, ESS. ESS, founded by John Dondero in Sun Valley, Idaho in 1998, specialized in exactly the category the Army had bungled first: goggles. Protective eyewear for the worst environments, where dust, debris, and impact arrive together. And ESS went straight at the failure that had started this whole story: fogging. Their goggles were engineered around ventilation and airflow, designs that moved air through the system so the lens stayed clear while the soldier worked. The Army's sealed goggle had locked the eye in and let it drown in its own heat. ESS solved the same brief by treating airflow as the entire point. The result was the closing of a circle no one had asked them to close. The ESS Profile NVG goggle became the only goggle the United States Marine Corps would authorize. The ESS Land Ops goggle became the Army's only authorized goggle for soldiers who wore prescription glasses. A company founded in a small Idaho town in 1998 had replaced the Army's issued goggle in 2 different services at once. 3 companies: Oakley, Wiley X, and ESS. 3 products a soldier chose, paid for, and trusted with his own eyesight. The Army was about to notice that its soldiers had quietly replaced its entire eye protection program. And for once, it was about to do something right. Put yourself behind the lens for a moment. It is 2006. You are in a vehicle outside Ramadi, and it is 115 degrees before the engine heat is counted. The issued goggles are in your pack, where they have been for a month. On your face is a pair of M-frames you bought with your own money. The lens is amber. It is not fogged because nothing is sealed against your skin. The truck stops. You are out and moving toward a doorway, and the world stays sharp the whole way. The edge of the wall, the shadow under the door, the ground where the wires would be. Your eyes are doing the one job that keeps you alive, and nothing is in the way of them. Then the blast. Not the doorway, the road behind you. A pressure wall and a spray of grit and casing and stone. The thing that has taken more eyes in this war than every bullet combined. It reaches your face. And a curved shield of polycarbonate, designed by a sport company for cyclists, takes the fragment that was meant for your eye. You keep your sight. Not because the Army handed you the thing that saved it, because you bought it yourself, and because you were wearing it. And wearing it was the entire problem the Army never solved. Within a few years, the bottom-up shift was everywhere in two wars. Special operations units were running on commercial eyewear. Conventional infantry was running on commercial eyewear. Soldiers and Marines were buying it faster than the supply chain could keep up. The Army was not choosing whether that happened, it was only choosing whether it had any say over it. And each month, more came home with the eye gone. On paper, the Army faced a real problem, and not a trivial one. An Army cannot simply bless whatever a soldier buys at a mall. Some commercial sunglasses are built for fashion, not impact. A fashion lens does not stop a fragment. It shatters when the fragment hits it, and now the soldier has taken a wound and a face full of his own lens at the same time. That concern was legitimate, so the Army did the correct thing. It built a program, Military Combat Eye Protection, and out of that program came a list, the Authorized Protective Eyewear List, the APEL. The APEL set a hard floor. To be approved, eyewear had to pass real ballistic impact testing. The Army did not have to invent that standard. It had written one already for the ballistic spectacle back in 1996, MIL PRF 31013, a 0.15 caliber steel pellet, stopped at about 650 feet per second. The testing standard had existed for years. What the Army had never built around it was a list. No fashion lenses, no guesswork. A soldier could look at the list and know that anything on it would actually stop what a battlefield throws. And here is the turn. When the Army built that list, it did not fill it with new government designs. By the mid-2000s, the names approved on it were the names the soldiers had already chosen with their own money: Oakley, Wiley X, ESS. The Army's official solution to its eye protection problem was to formally approve the eye protection its soldiers had bought to escape the Army's eye protection problem. This was the system working. That is the uncomfortable part. The APEL was a genuine fix, and combat eye injuries did fall, as protective eyewear that soldiers would actually wear became normal. But look at the path it took to get there. It took a behavioral study the Army ran in 1997 and then sat on. It took years of issuing eyewear that ended up on foreheads and in pockets. It took soldiers spending their own pay to cover a gap the Army had been formally warned about. And it took the institution 2 wars to catch up to the soldier. The fix did not come from the top. It came from the bottom, and the top ratified it once it could no longer be ignored. 0.1% of the body, the one wound a soldier does not walk off, and the one piece of him that does not grow back. For years, the thing standing between that eye and a wall of flying debris was a decision, not a lack of technology. The technology was sitting on a commercial shelf the entire time, good enough that the Army would eventually stamp its own approval on it. The thing standing in the way was a procurement system doing exactly what it is built to do. That system optimizes for what it can measure. It can measure whether a piece of eyewear was designed, tested, and issued. It cannot measure whether that eyewear is on a soldier's face at the moment of the blast. So it optimized for the first thing and called the job done. Issuing is a number on a form. Wearing is not. The Army counted the number it had, and the soldier paid for the number it did not. The APEL still exists today. It is still updated. The commercial brands a soldier once bought in secret are still on it, now with the Army's blessing. And this was not the only time the system was beaten by something off a store shelf. The Army issued a Kevlar combat helmet its own elite units threw out for a skateboard helmet. It issued a combat boot the SEALs swapped for a $60 canvas sneaker. It spent years on a combat trouser soldiers traded for a pair of $5 jeans. Different gear, different decade, the same outcome. The commercial product winning the job the procurement system was built to do. Every one of those stories is in the playlist on your screen. But the lesson underneath the 1997 study was never really fixed. A soldier will not wear what he does not trust, no matter how protective the lab says it is. The Army solved this one program. It did not solve the habit that produced it. And the next piece of equipment it issues will be tested for everything except the only question that decided this story. Will the soldier actually wear it? The Army got its answer once already, in 1997, in writing. If this made you want to go deeper, the 2 books that shaped this video are linked in the description. And so is The Vault, where I keep the full script, research, and everything that didn't make the final cut. Subscribe for more.